Laura stood at the edge of her apartment window in Brooklyn, the New York skyline glinting under a pale Monday morning sun. The city hummed below, a restless pulse of ambition and possibility. She sipped her coffee, the bitter warmth grounding her as she mentally rehearsed her pitch. Today was the day. After 5 years of relentless work, she would walk into the sleek Manhattan office of Horizon Dynamics and ask for the raise she deserved. But, as Laura walked toward Ethan's office, the warmth of that moment faded. The glass walls of the executive suite felt colder than usual, the space stripped of the personal touches left by the previous CEO. No family photos, no books, just a sleek laptop and a wilting fern in the corner, as if it had been forgotten in the rush of ambition. Ethan was already seated, his posture relaxed, his smile that same polished curve. "Laura, thanks for coming in," he said, gesturing to the chair across from him. His voice was smooth, but his eyes flicked to his phone, a subtle dismissal that stung more than it should have. She sat, her folder of notes resting lightly in her lap, and took a breath. This was her moment. "I'd like to discuss my compensation," she began, her voice steady but warm, the way she'd practiced. "Over the past 5 years, I've expanded the scope of our data systems, driving measurable outcomes. The global rollout I led has increased revenue by 18% and secured a $60 million deal with our Seattle client. I believe my salary should reflect the value I've brought and the responsibilities I've taken on." She slid a single sheet across the desk, a concise summary of her contributions, each point backed by data. Ethan nodded slowly, almost too slowly, his fingers tapping lightly against the table. He leaned back, his smile never wavering, but there was a distance in his eyes, a calculation she couldn't quite read. "I've reviewed your file," he said, his tone measured. "Your work is impressive, Laura, especially the data system, but we're in the middle of a major organizational review. Until the new structure settles, we're pausing all compensation discussions. It's not about you. It's about timing." The word landed like a stone. Timing. It was vague, convenient, a shield for decisions already made. Laura kept her expression neutral, her hands folded calmly in her lap. "So, no adjustments this quarter?" she asked, her voice even, though her pulse quickened. "Not yet," Ethan replied, standing to signal the meeting's end. "Let's revisit after the realignment. I appreciate your patience." He extended a hand, his grip firm but fleeting, and before she could respond, he was already turning back to his laptop. She stepped into the hallway, the glass doors closing softly behind her. Her phone buzzed a calendar alert for a team sync titled, "Updated Data Vision." Curiosity pulled her toward the analytics war room, where a glass board displayed a new system architecture. Her breath caught. The diagrams, the metric paths, the color-coded flows, they were hers. Every line a piece of her mind etched into reality. She'd built this system through sleepless nights and endless iterations, from New York to Seattle to San Francisco. But at the top of the board, in bold marker, was a name. Marcus Reed. Not hers. Marcus, the junior strategist who'd once crashed a test server in Dallas because he forgot to limit API calls. Her stomach twisted, not with anger, but with a dawning awareness. This wasn't just about timing. This was something deliberate, something deeper. Laura returned to her desk, the office noise fading into a dull hum. She opened her laptop and pulled up her personal journal, a digital space where she'd started documenting her thoughts after a leadership coach in Boston suggested it. "The 3rd of March, she typed. "I asked for what I earned. They gave me excuses. And now my work wears someone else's name." Her fingers paused, hovering over the keys. She wasn't defeated, not yet, but the spark of hope she'd carried that morning had flickered, replaced by a quieter, sharper resolve. She closed her laptop and glanced at the city beyond the window, its skyline a reminder of what she'd built and what she could still do. Ethan might think he held the reins, but Laura knew the system better than anyone. And systems, she'd learned, always revealed their truths in time. Her reflection in the glass showed a woman who had earned her place, not through loud demands, but through quiet, unshakable competence. Yet, a faint knot of unease tightened in her chest. Timing, they say, is everything. And something about this morning felt just a fraction off. That evening, over a glass of wine with Sarah at a cozy bar in the West Village. Laura shared her unease. "It's not just the raise," she said, her voice low. "It's the way they're rewriting my story." Sarah listened, her eyes softening with understanding. "You're the one who made Horizon what it is," she said. "Don't let them make you forget that." Laura nodded, a faint smile breaking through. She wasn't ready to fight, not yet. But she was ready to watch, to listen, to prepare. The storm was coming, and Laura would be ready when it broke. Laura had spent the weekend poring over her achievements, her laptop screen glowing late into the night. She had architected a global data system that transformed Horizon's clunky regional operations into a seamless, KPI-driven machine. Her work spanned 7 countries, from Seattle to Singapore, and last quarter, it had secured a $60 million deal with a major client in Seattle. The numbers didn't lie. Revenue up 18%, client retention at an all-time high, and a system so robust it had become the backbone of Horizon's growth. She wasn't asking for a reward. She was asking for recognition that was long overdue. Her pitch was polished, her slides meticulous, every metric a testament to her value. But as she rode the subway into Manhattan, the faces around her blurred, and her mind drifted to Ethan Caldwell, the new CEO. Ethan had been in the corner office for just 4 weeks, his arrival heralded by crisp suits and sharper buzzwords. He was an outsider, brought in from a rival firm in Chicago, with a reputation for shaking things up. Laura had seen his type before: charismatic, confident, but often clueless about the legacy systems that kept companies like Horizon running. At his first all-hands meeting, he'd spoken of disruptive synergy and next-gen scalability, terms that sounded impressive but felt hollow to someone who lived in the code. Still, Laura gave him the benefit of the doubt. She had no reason not to. Not yet. His smile, though, lingered in her memory. Too easy, too practiced, like a politician on the campaign trail. It was a smile that promised everything and committed to nothing. She stepped off the elevator on the 22nd floor, the Horizon Dynamics logo gleaming in polished steel. The office buzzed with the quiet intensity of a Monday morning, keyboards clicking, phones vibrating, the scent of overbrewed coffee in the air. Laura adjusted her blazer, her heels clicking against the hardwood as she made her way to the conference room. She'd organized a mock meeting with 2 trusted colleagues, Sarah from Analytics and Henry from DevOps, to test her pitch. It was a ritual she'd started years ago, a way to sharpen her thoughts and steady her nerves. Sarah, with her quick wit, played the skeptic, poking holes in Laura's arguments. Henry, ever the optimist, nodded enthusiastically, offering tweaks to her slides. They laughed over a shared memory of a late-night coding session in Miami, when Laura had saved a client demo by rewriting a buggy script in under an hour. "You've got this," Sarah said, squeezing her arm. Ethan would be a fool not to listen. Laura stepped into the glass-walled office of Horizon Dynamics Executive Suite in Manhattan, her heart beating a steady rhythm despite the unease that had lingered since her earlier pitch rehearsal. The New York skyline stretched beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows, a glittering reminder of the stakes she'd built her career on. It was vague, impersonal, a corporate shield for decisions already made. Laura's pulse quickened, but she kept her face composed, her hands still. "So, no adjustments this quarter?" she asked, her voice even, though a faint tremor of disbelief crept in. Ethan nodded, standing to signal the end of the conversation. "Not yet. Let's revisit after the realignment. I value your patience." His handshake was brief, his smile a polished dismissal, and Laura was out the door before she could press further. The hallway felt longer than usual, the glass walls reflecting her measured steps. She was still processing Ethan's words when her phone buzzed a calendar alert for a team sync titled Updated Data Vision. Curiosity tugged at her, and she detoured toward the analytics war room, a space she'd once called her second home. The glass board outside was a mosaic of diagrams and metrics, a blueprint of the system she'd poured her soul into. Her eyes traced the familiar lines: data flows, KPI weights, color-coded paths she'd designed during late nights in New York and client calls in San Francisco. But, at the top, in bold black marker, was a name that stopped her cold. Marcus Reed. Not hers. Marcus, the junior strategist who'd once crashed a test server in Dallas with a careless API call, now claimed her work as his own. The realization hit like a slow, heavy wave, not anger. Not yet, but a dawning clarity that this was no accident. Laura stood frozen, her reflection faint in the glass. She'd built this system through years of sacrifice, debugging code at 3 a.m., soothing clients in Seattle, and mentoring teams in Miami. Every line was a piece of her, and now it wore someone else's name. She forced herself to move, her heels clicking softly as she returned to her desk. The office buzzed around her colleagues typing, phones ringing, but it felt distant, like a world she no longer fully belonged to. She opened her laptop and pulled up the encrypted app she'd started using after a tech conference in Boston, a digital vault for her notes and observations. The 3rd of March, she typed. I asked for what I earned. They gave me excuses, and now my system belongs to Marcus. Her fingers lingered, the words staring back at her. She wasn't defeated, but the spark of hope she'd carried into Ethan's office had dimmed, replaced by a quiet, burning resolve. That afternoon, Laura slipped into a coffee chat session in the office lounge, an informal gathering where colleagues swapped ideas over pastries. She hoped to gauge the mood, to see if others had noticed the shift. The conversation was light talk of new projects, weekend plans, but when Marcus's name came up, a junior analyst praised his vision for the data system. Laura's grip tightened on her mug, but she smiled, nodding as if in agreement. The praise wasn't just wrong, it was a theft, a rewriting of her legacy. She excused herself early, her mind racing. Back at her desk, she opened the system's backend, her fingers moving instinctively through the code. Marcus's recent commits were superficial renamed variables, tweaked layouts, but the core, her core, was untouched. They hadn't dared alter the foundation, likely because they didn't understand it. A faint smile curved her lips. They could take her name, but they couldn't take her knowledge. That evening, Laura met Sarah at a West Village bar, the same one where they'd celebrated the Seattle deal. Over a glass of Pinot, she shared what she'd seen. It's not just the rays, she said, her voice low but steady. They're erasing me. Sarah's eyes softened, her hand reaching across the table. You're the one who built this company's future, she said. Don't let them make you invisible. Laura nodded, a warmth spreading through her. She wasn't ready to fight, not yet. She clutched a slim folder, its pages crisp, with data points that told the story of her 5-year triumph. A global data system that had turned Horizon from a regional player into a powerhouse, securing a $60 million deal with a Seattle client. Today, she wasn't just asking for a raise. She was claiming the recognition her work demanded. But as she crossed the threshold of Ethan Caldwell's office, the new CEO's domain, a chill settled over her. But she was ready to watch, to listen, to prepare. The meeting with Ethan had changed everything. Not because it denied her a raise, but because it revealed a truth. Her battle wasn't just for recognition. It was for her place in a system she'd created. And Laura knew systems better than anyone. As she walked home through the crisp New York night, the city's pulse matched her own, quiet, determined beat, ready for whatever came next. The space was stark, almost Sterilino family photos. No trace of warmth, just a polished desk, a laptop, and a neglected fern drooping in the corner. Ethan's smile greeted her, too wide, too rehearsed, and Laura felt the first crack in her carefully constructed confidence. Laura, good to see you, Ethan said, his voice smooth as he gestured to a leather chair across from him. His suit was immaculate, fresh from some Chicago tailor, but his eyes darted briefly to his phone, a flicker of distraction that stung like a paper cut. She sat, her posture straight, her folder resting lightly on her lap. She'd practiced this moment, not just with her colleagues Sarah and Henry during their mock meeting, but in the quiet of her Brooklyn apartment, where she'd whispered her points to the mirror until they felt like second nature. Revenue growth, client retention. The global data system she'd architected across 7 countries, from Seattle to Singapore. Every metric was a brick in the foundation of Horizon's success, and Laura had laid them all. She took a breath, steadying herself against the weight of Ethan's gaze, and began. I'd like to discuss adjusting my compensation, she said, her voice clear, professional, but threaded with the warmth of conviction. My work on the global data system has driven an 18% revenue increase and secured a $60 million contract with our Seattle client. I've taken on expanded responsibilities, managing cross-continental teams and optimizing workflows. I believe my salary should reflect the value I've delivered. She slid her folder across the desk, a single page summarizing her contributions in clean, irrefutable numbers. Ethan's fingers grazed the paper, but he didn't open it. Instead, he leaned back, his smile softening into something almost sympathetic, and Laura's stomach tightened. She'd seen that look before, in boardrooms and client meetings, when someone was about to deflect. "Laura, I've reviewed your file," Ethan said, his tone measured, each word chosen with care. "Your contributions are undeniable, especially the data system. It's a cornerstone of our growth." He paused, folding his hands, and the air seemed to thicken. "But we're in the midst of a significant organizational review. Until the new structure is finalized, we're freezing all compensation discussions. It's not about you, it's about timing." The word timing landed like a door slamming shut. Laura walked through the glass corridors of Horizon Dynamics' Manhattan office, the weight of the past week pressing against her chest. The New York skyline shimmered beyond the windows, its indifference a stark contrast to the storm brewing inside her. Decision-making. The phrase was a surgical strike, severing her from the system she'd built across 7 countries, from Seattle to Singapore. The meeting ended abruptly. Ethan's polite, "Thanks for your understanding," ringing hollow as he turned back to his laptop. Laura stepped into the hallway, the glass walls reflecting her composed exterior. But inside, a quiet chaos churned. She returned to her desk, the office humming around her as if nothing had changed. Colleagues typed, phones buzzed, but Laura felt like a ghost, present yet unseen. Her inbox pinged with a company-wide email, the subject line a gut punch. "Exciting news. Marcus Reed appointed lead strategist, Global Data Initiative." Attached was Marcus's photo, his smile confident, his suit crisp, as if he'd been born for the role. Laura's name was nowhere in the message. 5 years of late nights, of debugging code in San Francisco, of mentoring teams in Boston, reduced to a void. She stared at the screen, the words blurring, not from tears, but from a deeper, sharper clarity. This wasn't a demotion. It was an erasure. Laura opened her encrypted note-taking app, the one she'd started using after a tech conference in Boston. "The 6th of March, she typed. "They took my system, my role, and gave them to Marcus. I'm a mentor now, a guest in my own work." Her fingers paused, the weight of the words settling in. She wasn't angry, not yet. Anger was too loud, too messy. What she felt was quieter, more precise, like the hum of a system before it powers on. She closed her laptop and leaned back, her eyes drifting to the New York skyline. The city didn't care about her demotion, but it reminded her of what she'd built and what she could still do. That afternoon, Laura slipped into an online tech forum she'd joined after a workshop in Chicago, a space where she could share her thoughts anonymously. Under the pseudonym Codeweaver, she posted a question. "What do you do when your work is claimed by someone else?" The responses flooded in stories of stolen credit, advice on documenting contributions, encouragement to keep fighting. One user wrote, "Your knowledge is your power. They can take your title, but not your mind." The words resonated, a spark in the fog. Laura began a new project that evening, a personal audit of the data system's backend. She traced Marcus's recent commits, superficial tweaks that barely scratched the surface of her architecture. The core remained untouched, a testament to her foresight and their ignorance. Later, over coffee with Sarah in the office lounge, Laura shared the news. "They demoted me," she said, her voice steady but raw. Sarah's eyes widened, her mug froze in midair. "Marcus? Seriously?" He couldn't code his way out of a paper bag. Laura managed a faint smile, the first in hours. "It's not about him. It's about what they think they can take." Sarah reached across the table, her voice fierce. "You're the heart of this system, Laura. Don't let them forget it." The words were a lifeline, pulling Laura back from the edge of isolation. She nodded, her resolve hardening. She wouldn't storm Ethan's office or confront Marcus. Not yet. Instead, she'd watch, listen, and prepare. It had been 3 days since her meeting with Ethan Caldwell, the new CEO. where her request for a raise backed by 5 years of building a global data system that secured a $60 million Seattle contract was dismissed with a vague promise of better timing. 3 days since she'd seen her system's architecture, her life's work, displayed on a glass board with Marcus Reed's name scrawled across it. As she walked home through the crisp New York evening, the city's pulse matched her own quiet, determined beat. The demotion had stripped her of her title, but not her power. She knew the system better than anyone, every line of code, every hidden logic loop. Ethan and Marcus might think they'd sidelined her, but Laura was still in the game. She pulled out her phone and starred Sarah's words in her mind, a reminder of the allies she still had. The quiet demotion wasn't the end. It was the beginning of something else, something she'd shape on her own terms. The skyline glowed ahead, and Laura felt a flicker of hope, not loud, but steady, like a system powering up for the fight. Marcus, the junior strategist who'd once crashed a test server in Dallas with a rookie mistake, was now the face of her creation. The sting of that betrayal lingered, but today, Laura felt a different kind of unease. A calendar invite had arrived at 6:07 a.m., titled simply Realignment, summoning her to Ethan's office at 10:30 a.m. No agenda, no context, just 15 minutes wedged between his finance meetings. Her instincts whispered that something was wrong, and as she approached the executive suite, the air felt heavier, like the moment before a storm breaks. Ethan's office was as barren as before, a sterile space with no trace of the man who occupied it. No photos, no books, just a laptop, a pristine desk, and that same wilting fern, its leaves curling in quiet surrender. Ethan didn't look up when Laura knocked, his eyes fixed on his screen. "Come in," he said, his voice flat, devoid of the polished charm he'd wielded days ago. She stood for a moment, waiting for an invitation to sit, but none came. The silence was thick, deliberate, and Laura forced her breath to stay even. Finally, Ethan closed his laptop with a sharp snap and met her gaze. "Laura, I'll get straight to it," he said, folding his hands. "As part of our organizational restructuring, we're shifting leadership responsibilities in the data division. Effective immediately, you'll move to a senior analyst role, advisory capacity. You'll retain your salary and benefits, but you'll report to Marcus, who will lead the global data initiative." The words hit like a slow, deliberate cut. Laura's stomach dropped, but her face remained still, a mask honed by years in high-stakes boardrooms. Marcus? The same Marcus, who, just last month in Miami, had asked her to explain basic data partitioning, the one who'd needed her to debug his code after a botched client demo in Chicago. She opened her mouth, then closed it, her mind racing to process the absurdity. Ethan continued, his tone clipped, as if reading from a script. "This isn't about performance. It's a strategic decision. Marcus brings a fresh perspective, a growth-focused vision. We value your experience, but we need alignment with our new direction." Laura nodded slowly, her throat tightening. "And my role in this advisory capacity?" she asked, her voice calm but edged with steel. Ethan's eyes flickered, almost impatient. "Think of it as mentoring. You'll guide the team, share legacy knowledge, but from a non-decision-making standpoint." Laura sat alone in the dim glow of Horizon Dynamics' Manhattan office, the New York skyline, a silent witness beyond the windows. It was 7:15 a.m., the hour when the world felt still, before the hum of keyboards and coffee machines filled the 22nd floor. She opened her encrypted note-taking app, the one she'd adopted after a Boston tech conference. "The 8th of March, she typed. "They took my title, but not my power. Apex Core is mine, and the system still answers to me." The words felt like a vow, a reclaiming of her agency. Laura wasn't ready to confront Ethan or Marcus not yet. Confrontation was loud, predictable, and she'd learned in boardrooms from Dallas to San Francisco that power wasn't in the shouting. It was in the knowing, the preparing, the waiting. She closed her laptop and stood, stretching as the first rays of sunlight warmed the office. The fern in Ethan's office might be wilting, but Laura was not. She was rooting deeper, drawing strength from the system she'd built and the truth it held. That weekend, Laura attended a tech summit in Chicago, a last-minute decision to clear her mind and reconnect with her purpose. The panels on intellectual property and system security felt like they were speaking directly to her. A speaker from Seattle, a veteran engineer, shared a story of protecting her work by documenting every decision, a lesson Laura took to heart. Between sessions, she sketched a system map on her tablet, a visual archive of Apex Core's structure and her hidden modules. It wasn't just a technical exercise, it was a reclaiming of her legacy, a way to anchor herself amid the storm. She jotted a quote from the speaker in her notes. "Your work is your signature. Sign it boldly, even if no one sees it yet." The words stayed with her, a reminder that her power wasn't in Marcus's stolen credit or Ethan's corporate games. It was in the code, in her mind, in her hands. Back in New York, Laura joined an online tech forum under her pseudonym Codeweaver, a space where she'd found solace after her demotion. She posted a question: "How do you protect your work when the system tries to erase you?" The responses were a chorus of resilience stories of women in tech, reclaiming their contributions, advice on legal protections, encouragement to own your expertise. One user wrote, "They can't steal what's in your head. Use it." Laura smiled, her resolve sharpening. She began cross-referencing her system map with Horizon's commit logs, documenting Marcus's changes and their gaps. It was meticulous, almost meditative, a way to channel her energy into something constructive. She wasn't plotting revenge-ish, was preparing for truth. That evening, Laura met Sarah at their usual West Village bar, the one where they'd toasted the Seattle deal. Over a glass of Pinot, she shared her discovery. "The system's mine," she said, her voice low but steady. "Apex Core, the modules, they can't take that." Sarah's eyes widened, a grin breaking through. "You're a genius, Laura. They have no idea who they're dealing with." Laura laughed, the sound light but grounded. Sarah's belief was a lifeline, a reminder that she wasn't alone. "I'm not fighting yet," Laura said. "But I'm ready." Sarah raised her glass. "To hidden power." They clinked, the moment sealing Laura's shift from victim to strategist. As she walked home through Brooklyn, the city's pulse matched her own steady, determined beat. The demotion had been a blow, but it had also revealed her strength. She knew the system better than anyone. Every line of code, every hidden guardian. Ethan and Marcus might think they'd sidelined her, but Laura was still the architect. She pulled out her phone, opening her note app to add one more line. "The system doesn't forget who built it. Neither will I." The skyline glowed ahead, a constellation of possibility. Laura wasn't just surviving. She was preparing to thrive, not by shouting, but by wielding the quiet, unshakable power she'd always had. The game wasn't over. It was just beginning, and Laura held the key. Her laptop screen cast a soft light across her face. Its code a familiar language that had carried her through 5 years of triumphs, building a global data system that secured a $60 million deal with a Seattle client, streamlining workflows from San Francisco to Singapore. But now, that same system bore Marcus Reed's name, and Laura bore the weight of a demotion. Relegated to a senior analyst role under his leadership. The sting of Ethan Caldwell's dismissal, the new CEO's curt strategic realignment, still lingered, as did the company-wide email crowning Marcus the lead strategist. Yet, in this quiet morning, Laura wasn't mourning. She was digging, searching the system she'd created for answers, and what she found ignited a spark not of anger, but of power. Her fingers moved swiftly across the keyboard, navigating the back-end architecture she knew like the streets of her Brooklyn neighborhood. The office was empty, the glass walls reflecting only her silhouette, but Laura felt alive, tethered to the code that had defined her career. She'd started this audit days ago, after seeing her work claimed by Marcus on a glass board outside the analytics war room. His superficial commits renamed variables, tweaked dashboard colors were laughably shallow, proof he didn't grasp the system's core. But as Laura traced deeper, into the logic layers she'd built during late nights in Miami and client calls in Chicago, she stumbled upon something extraordinary. The system ran on Apex Core, a proprietary framework she'd licensed personally 3 years ago in Boston, when Horizon's budget delays threatened a critical project. She'd used her own credit card, her own signature, to secure stability for the team. The license panel confirmed it. Owner: Laura Bennett. License type: Developer Enterprise. Status: Active. Auto renews. April 2026. Her breath caught. The company didn't own Apex Core. She did. The realization was a quiet earthquake, reshaping the landscape of her demotion. Ethan and Marcus could strip her title, reassign her role, but they were running a $60 million operation on a framework tied to her name. Laura leaned back, her eyes drifting to the skyline, the Empire State Building piercing the dawn. She wasn't powerless. She was the foundation. But there was more. As she delved further, she found the silent guardians she'd embedded in the system micro-modules of logic, invisible to anyone who hadn't lived in the code as she had. These weren't in the documentation, a precaution from the early days when compliance was an afterthought. They stabilized data flows, recalibrated lag times, and auto-cleaned redundant entries, ensuring the system's resilience. Marcus hadn't touched them. Ethan didn't know they existed. Laura's heart quickened, not with vengeance, but with clarity. Her demotion hadn't erased her control, it had hidden it, like a key buried in plain sight. Laura sat at her desk in the Horizon Dynamics office, the Manhattan skyline a distant blur beyond the glass walls. It was 6:45 a.m., the quiet hour when the 22nd floor belonged to her alone, before the hum of ambition filled the space. Her laptop glowed, its screen a window into the global data system she'd built over 5 years, a system that had secured a $60 million deal with a Seattle client, streamlined workflows from San Francisco to Singapore, and earned her a demotion instead of a raise. She saved her changes, burying them in routine commits labeled optimization updates, and closed her laptop. The first rays of sunlight warmed the office, casting long shadows across her desk. Laura felt a shift, not anger, but a cool, focused clarity, like the moment a system hums to life. That evening, Laura attended a career coaching session she'd joined after a tech summit in Chicago, a virtual group where professionals shared strategies for navigating workplace challenges. The facilitator, a woman from San Francisco, spoke about channeling emotions into action. Anger is a signal, she said. Use it to build, not to break. Laura nodded, her mind replaying her morning's work. She wasn't breaking Horizon's system, she was building a path to truth. In the group's chat, she shared a veiled version of her story, describing a hypothetical demotion and asking how to reclaim agency. The responses were a lifeline. Document everything. Trust your expertise. Let the work speak. One member, a coder from Boston, wrote, "Systems don't lie. People do. Use that." Laura smiled, her resolve hardening. She opened her encrypted note app, typing, "The 10th of March. I rewrote the rules today. Not for revenge, but for truth. The system will tell the story." The next day, Laura sat through a quarterly metrics call, her headphones in, her face unreadable. Marcus stood at the front of the conference room, his navy blazer slightly too big, walking through a dashboard that glowed with her manipulated metrics. Uptime. Client engagement, sales velocity, all green, all perfect. Ethan leaned back, arms folded, his smile wide. "This is what progress looks like," he said, his voice carrying the smug certainty of a man who believed he'd won. "We've turned a clunky legacy system into a profit engine." Laura's lips curved, not in pride or bitterness, but in restraint. She wasn't sabotaging, she was observing, letting the system perform the script they'd demanded. Colleagues nodded, some glancing at her, their eyes flickering with unease. They knew she'd built the foundation, but no one spoke. Laura didn't need them to. The code was her voice, and it was speaking. After the meeting, Laura posted anonymously on her tech forum, Codeweaver's words a quiet beacon. "Sometimes, the loudest rebellion is the one no one sees coming. Trust your craft." The replies poured in, stories of silent victories, of women in tech outsmarting systems that tried to erase them. One user shared a quote Laura saved. "The best revenge is a life well lived, and a truth well told." She carried those words into her evening, meeting Sarah at their West Village bar. Over wine, Laura hinted at her plan. "I'm letting the system do the talking," she said, her voice steady. Sarah's eyes gleamed. "You're a mastermind, Laura. They'll never see it coming." They clinked glasses, the moment a quiet pact. Laura wasn't fighting for applause, she was fighting for her legacy. As she walked home through Brooklyn, the city's pulse matched her own deliberate, unshakable rhythm. The demotion had been a theft, but it had also revealed her strength. She knew the system better than anyone, every algorithm, every hidden module. Ethan and Marcus might think they'd won, but Laura was rewriting the game. She pulled out her phone, adding to her note app, "The rebellion is quiet, but it's mine. The truth is coming." The skyline glowed. A canvas of possibility. Laura wasn't just surviving. She was orchestrating, not with noise, but with the silent power of a system she'd built and would never let go. The storm was brewing, and Laura was its architect. Ethan Caldwell, the new CEO, had dismissed her request for fair compensation, and Marcus Reed, a junior strategist who'd once crashed a server in Dallas, now claimed her work as his own. But Laura wasn't defeated. Her discovery of the Apex Core framework, licensed in her name in Boston, and the hidden micromodules she'd embedded in the system had shifted something inside her. She wasn't just a sidelined analyst. She was the architect. And today, she would begin her silent rebellion not with loud confrontations, but with the precision of code and the patience of a strategist. Her fingers danced across the keyboard, navigating the system's backend with the ease of someone who'd lived in its logic for years. The office was still, the glass walls reflecting her focused silhouette, but Laura's mind was alive, weaving a plan as intricate as the data flows she'd designed. She'd spent days auditing the system, confirming her control over Apex Core and the undocumented modules that stabilized its core. Marcus's superficial tweaks renamed metrics, polished dashboards were laughable, proof he didn't understand the system's soul. Ethan's praise for Marcus's vision in team meetings was equally hollow, a performance for a boardroom in Chicago that didn't know better. But Laura did, and she knew that power wasn't in titles or applause. It was in the code, in the choices she made now, in the subtle shifts that would ripple outward unseen until it was too late. She opened the KPI weighting algorithm, the heart of the system's performance tracking. Originally, it balanced client satisfaction, retention rates, and sustainable growth, a formula she'd refined through late nights in Miami and client feedback from Seattle. Under Marcus's direction, the focus had shifted to volume clicks, reports, raw numbers that looked impressive but lacked substance. Laura leaned into it, rewriting the logic to amplify short-term spikes. The dashboards would glow with green bars, showing record-high engagement and API activity, but the gains would be hollow, like a house built on sand. She adjusted the forecasting engine next, stripping its 7 variables: vendor lag, seasonal trends, logistics data down to 4, introducing a 9% bias in the demand curve. The predictions would look plausible, even brilliant, but they'd drift quietly, sowing chaos 2 cycles later. Finally, she disabled 3 layers of the alert system, the crown jewel she'd built to flag anomalies before they became crises. Now, delays and errors would slip through, unnoticed, like cracks in a dam. Laura paused, her cursor blinking on the screen. Was this sabotage? The word felt too crude, too reckless. She wasn't destroying the system, she was reshaping it to reflect the priorities of those who'd claimed it. If Marcus wanted volume, she'd give him volume, dazzling and empty. If Ethan wanted a new vision, she'd let it shine until it burned. Her rebellion was silent, surgical, a whisper in the code that would speak louder than any outburst. Laura leaned against the window of Horizon Dynamics' Manhattan office, the New York skyline stretching out like a map of her ambitions. It was late afternoon, the 22nd floor quieter now as colleagues trickled out, their chatter fading into the hum of the city below. 2 weeks had passed since Laura's silent rebellion began, when she'd rewritten the global data system's algorithms to amplify hollow metrics, strip predictive variables, and silence critical alerts. Laura's isolation grew heavier, though, a weight she carried through the office's glass corridors. She approached Sarah, her closest ally, during a coffee break in the lounge. "Have you seen the forecasting models?" Laura asked, her voice careful. "They're off by at least 10%. I've logged 3 delivery misalignments this week." Sarah glanced up from her phone, her eyes flickering with discomfort. "Maybe, but it's not really your call anymore, is it?" The words stung, sharper than Laura expected. "I'm just trying to help," she said, her tone even. Sarah softened, but her reply was gentle dismissal. "I know you built this place, Laura, but things are moving on. Maybe you should too." Laura nodded, forcing a smile. But as she walked away, the office felt emptier, its buzz a reminder of her fading presence. That night, Laura joined a virtual Women in Tech meetup she'd found after a Chicago summit, a space where she could be code weaver, not the sidelined analyst. She shared a veiled story of her demotion, asking how to navigate a workplace that silenced her. The responses were a chorus of solidarity. Keep records. Trust your instincts. Your work will outlast their games. A developer from Seattle wrote, "The system always tells the truth, even when people don't." Laura nodded, her resolve deepening. She began archiving emails and commit logs on a personal cloud drive, a digital fortress for the evidence she'd need when the cracks grew too wide to ignore. It wasn't about revenge, it was about ensuring her story would be told. The next day, Laura led a small training session for new hires, a task she'd volunteered for to stay connected. She walked them through the system's basics, her voice warm but authoritative, sharing stories of debugging crises in Miami and client wins in Boston. The recruits listened, wide-eyed, one whispering to another, "She's the one who built this." The moment was fleeting, but it grounded her, a reminder that her expertise still mattered. She ended the session with a quiet piece of advice. "Document your work. It's your legacy." The words were for them, but also for her, a mantra for the fight ahead. Over wine at their West Village bar, Laura shared the San Francisco news with Sarah. "They lost $9 million, she said, her voice steady but alive with purpose. "And Priya knows it's not my system anymore." Sarah's eyes widened, a grin breaking through. "You're playing chess while they're playing checkers." Laura laughed, the sound light but fierce. "I'm not playing yet. I'm setting the board." They clinked glasses, the moment a quiet alliance. Laura wasn't alone, not entirely. Priya's message, Sarah's belief, the recruits' awe, they were threads in a tapestry she was weaving, one that would hold when the system finally spoke. As she walked home through Brooklyn, the city's pulse matched her own, a steady, unyielding rhythm. The cracks were showing, and Laura was no longer the ghost in the office. She was the architect, watching her system reveal the truth. She opened her note app, typing, "The fractures are here. The system is mine and it's talking." The skyline glowed, a beacon of possibility. Laura wasn't just enduring. She was orchestrating, not with shouts, but with the silent strength of a truth that could no longer be contained. The storm was breaking, and Laura was ready. The system she'd built over 5 years, securing a $60 million deal with a Seattle client, streamlining workflows from San Francisco to Singapore, still bore her hidden signature, even as Marcus Reed's name adorned its surface. Demoted to a senior analyst under Marcus's leadership, dismissed by Ethan Caldwell, the new CEO, Laura had chosen precision over protest. Her changes were invisible, buried in routine commits, but now, the cracks were beginning to show, and Laura stood at the edge, watching the system she'd shaped start to unravel. The office felt different these days, its energy shifting, like a tide pulling away from shore. Laura's desk, once a hub of collaboration, was now a solitary island. Meetings she'd once led happened without her. Emails she'd once shaped went straight to Ethan's inbox, and Marcus's updates dominated the Slack channels. Yet every glowing dashboard, every green-lit metric, was a product of her handiwork twisted now to serve a flawed vision. She opened her laptop, her encrypted note app, a refuge she'd relied on since a Boston Tech Summit. "The 17th of March, she typed. "The system is singing their song, but it's my melody. The first fracture came today." Her words captured the morning's news, a seismic shift that no one else seemed to feel. Horizon's San Francisco client, a legacy partner worth $9 million, had canceled their upcoming renewal, citing unacceptable delivery failures. The email had landed at 10:12 a.m., its subject line stark, "Urgent, order delay, San Francisco." Laura read it twice, her pulse steady but her mind racing. The client reported missing shipments, mismatched invoices, and outdated units errors the system should have flagged weeks ago. But Laura's disabled alerts, part of her calculated rebellion, had let the issues slip through, silent as shadows. Marcus called it a logistics hiccup in a team huddle, his navy blazer creased from nervous fidgeting. Ethan dismissed it as a client overreaction, his Chicago-honed confidence unshaken. Laura sat in the back, her face unreadable, her headphones a shield against the office's buzz. They didn't see the truth. The system wasn't failing it, was performing exactly as she'd designed, exposing the flaws of their leadership while cloaked in the illusion of success. The San Francisco client's decision wasn't just a financial blow, it was a personal vindication. That evening, as Laura scrolled through her inbox, a LinkedIn message pinged from Priya Patel, the client's VP of Operations. "Hi Laura," it read. "Are you still overseeing the data system? We've noticed inconsistencies in the outputs lately. It doesn't feel like your work. Hope you're well." Laura stared at the screen, her heart skipping. They noticed. Someone saw through the facade, recognized the precision she'd once brought to their partnership. She didn't reply not yet. But the message was a spark, a reminder that her legacy endured, even as Horizon tried to erase it. She saved the note in her app, adding, "Priya sees it. The truth is louder than their lies." Laura stood near the edge of the analytics war room in Horizon Dynamics' Manhattan office, the New York skyline a distant shimmer through the glass walls. It was mid-afternoon, the 22nd floor alive with the hum of keyboards and murmured conversations, but Laura felt like a shadow, present yet unseen. That evening, Laura joined a podcast interview she'd booked after a Boston conference, a low-profile tech show called Code and Courage. Speaking as Codeweaver, her anonymous persona, she shared insights on building resilient systems, weaving in a veiled story of her demotion. "The best systems," she said, her voice steady, "carry their creator's intent, even when others try to claim them. Trust your work to tell your story." The host, a developer from Seattle, praised her perspective, and listeners flooded the chat with support. "Your story resonates," one wrote. "Keep owning your craft." The words were a lifeline, pulling Laura from the isolation of Horizon's glass walls. She saved the podcast link in her note app, a reminder that her voice still mattered, even if it was hidden for now. Back at the office, Laura's isolation deepened. She volunteered for another training session with new hires, teaching them the system's basics with the same warmth she'd brought to client calls in San Francisco. One recruit, a young woman from Dallas, lingered after, asking, "How do you stay motivated when the work gets tough?" Laura smiled, her answer deliberate. "Focus on what you control, your knowledge, your integrity. The rest will follow." The words were for the recruit, but they anchored Laura, too, a mantra for the quiet rebellion she was waging. She archived more commit logs that night, storing them on her personal cloud drive, a digital vault of evidence Marcus's shallow changes, her original code, the system's silent truth. By Friday, David's frustration was palpable. Laura overheard him in the war room, his voice sharper. "The forecasting drift is off by 10%, and I can't find the root logic. This isn't standard," Marcus stammered, deflecting. "It's probably legacy issues from before my time." Laura's pulse quickened, but she stayed still, her headphones a shield. David's struggle wasn't just technical, it was a mirror, reflecting Marcus's inadequacy and Ethan's oversight. The $9 million loss had rattled Ethan enough to hire David, but his pride kept him from asking Laura, the one who'd built the system. She didn't offer help. She didn't need to. The system was her voice, and it was speaking louder with every passing day. Over wine at their West Village bar, Laura shared the consultant's arrival with Sarah. "He can't crack the system," she said, her voice low but alive with purpose. "And Marcus is scrambling." Sarah's eyes lit up, a grin breaking through. "You're outsmarting them all, Laura. It's brilliant." Laura laughed, the sound light, but fierce. "I'm just letting the system do what it does, best reveal the truth." They clinked glasses the moment a quiet pact. Sarah's support, the podcast's encouragement, the recruit's question, they were threads in a tapestry Laura was weaving, one that would hold when the cracks became chasms. As she walked home through Brooklyn, the city's pulse matched her own steady, unyielding rhythm. The consultant's arrival had exposed the fragility of Marcus's facade, but it had also deepened Laura's isolation. She was no longer the architect in the office's eyes, but she was still the system's heart. She opened her note app, typing, "The cracks are wide now. David sees it. Even if they don't, I'm ready for what's next." The skyline glowed, a beacon of resilience. Laura wasn't just enduring. She was orchestrating, not with noise, but with the silent strength of a truth that could no longer be ignored. The storm was nearing its peak, and Laura stood at its center, unshaken, her power hidden but undeniable. 3 weeks had passed since her silent rebellion began. When she'd subtly altered the global data system, she'd built a system that had secured a $60 million deal with a Seattle client and optimized workflows from San Francisco to Singapore. Her demotion to senior analyst under Marcus Reed, a junior strategist who'd claimed her work, and the dismissal of her raise request by Ethan Caldwell, the new CEO, had pushed her to act. She'd rewritten algorithms to inflate hollow metrics, stripped predictive variables, and silenced alerts, letting the system perform a dazzling but flawed illusion. The cracks had surfaced a $9 million. San Francisco client had walked away, citing delivery failures, but Ethan and Marcus deflected blame, oblivious to the truth Laura had engineered. Now, a new player had entered the scene. A consultant brought in to audit the system, and Laura watched from the sidelines, her heart steady with the quiet power of knowing. The consultant's arrival was announced in a brisk email from Ethan, titled, System Optimization Review. David Kessler, a gray-haired expert from Los Angeles, had a reputation for untangling complex architectures, his LinkedIn profile boasting decades of experience. Laura saw him first in the office lobby, his expensive laptop tucked under one arm, his handshake with Ethan exuding polite confidence. By 4:30 p.m., David was hunched over Marcus's monitor in the war room, their voices low but audible from Laura's desk a few rows away. "I'm trying to trace the predictive module," David said, his tone measured but tinged with frustration. "The top-level logic calls are buried in references I can't map. This feels like legacy code, but it's advanced." Marcus shifted, his navy blazer creased. "She made it complicated on purpose," he muttered, his voice sharp with defensiveness. David raised an eyebrow, his pen pausing. "Or maybe it's just sophisticated. Whoever built this knew what they were doing." Laura's lips curved faintly, her headphones hiding her reaction. She didn't speak, didn't move. She didn't need to. The system was speaking for her. David's struggle was a quiet validation, a crack in the facade Marcus and Ethan had built. Laura had designed the system with layers of elegant C-micro-modules for stability, undocumented patches from early days in Miami, all woven into the Apex Core framework she'd licensed in Boston with her own funds. Marcus's superficial tweaks couldn't mask the system's depth, and Ethan's ignorance couldn't erase her signature. But the office around her felt colder, its energy shifting away from her. Colleagues who once sought her advice now avoided her gaze, their whispers about Marcus's brilliance, a painful echo of her erasure. Even Sarah, her closest ally, had grown distant, her words in the lounge days ago. "Maybe you should move on," still stinging like a bruise. Laura opened her encrypted note app, her refuge since a Chicago Tech Summit. "The 20th of March, she typed. "The consultant sees the system's truth, but I'm invisible here. The cracks are growing and I'm still holding the key." Laura sat in the pre-dawn stillness of Horizon Dynamics' Manhattan office, the New York skyline, a quiet constellation beyond the glass walls. It was 6:30 a.m., the 22nd floor empty save for the soft glow of her laptop screen, a portal to the global data system she'd built over 5 years, a system that had secured a $60 million deal with a Seattle client and optimized workflows from San Francisco to Singapore. Marcus stammered, his voice cracking. "It's, a formatting error. We'll move on." He clicked frantically, but the message persisted, hard-coded into every version of the deck. Laura's pulse quickened, not with fear, but with the thrill of a plan unfolding perfectly. The air shifted, heavy with unspoken questions. Martin Cross, a senior director from Chicago, opened his laptop, his brow furrowing. "Hold on," he said, his tone firm. "The auto report just hit my inbox. It's in there too." He turned his screen, showing the same line embedded in the emailed executive summary. Murmurs rippled through the room. Marcus's face paled, his hands fumbling with his notes. Ethan stood, his voice tight. "This is a technical glitch. We'll investigate." But Martin's eyes were sharp, unyielding. "Who inserted this? And who's the builder?" He scanned the room, then opened his email, hitting reply. All. Who is Laura Bennett? And why isn't she presenting this? Her name hung in the air, a spark igniting the silence. Laura's breath caught, but she stayed still, her hands steady, her heart a quiet drum of resolve. At 8:42 a.m., her phone buzzed a message from the compliance officer. Urgent. Available for a brief today? System integrity. Laura didn't reply, not yet. She leaned back, every nerve taut but alive, not with triumph, but with focus. The message hadn't crashed the system or exposed her. It had whispered, just loud enough to unsettle the room, to plant a question that couldn't be ignored. She'd been erased for weeks, her title stripped, her work claimed, but now her name was in every inbox, on every screen, without her saying a word. The boardroom's tension was palpable, Marcus's stammering a faint echo as Ethan called for a recess. Laura slipped out, her steps measured, her mind clear. The truth was live, and it was hers. That evening, Laura joined a virtual Women in Tech meetup, her Codeweaver persona a shield for her story. She shared a veiled account of her day, describing a hypothetical moment when a system spoke for its creator. The group's responses were, electric. That's power. You're rewriting the game. A coder from San Francisco wrote, the truth doesn't need a megaphone. It just needs a spark. Laura saved the words in her note app, typing, the 24th of March. The message went live. They heard my name. The system spoke. The validation was a quiet fire, warming her against the office's chill. She'd also started a letter to my future self, after a Chicago career coaching session, a private reflection on her journey. You didn't shout, she wrote. You built, and the truth found its way. Over wine at their West Village bar, Laura shared the boardroom moment with Sarah. My name was everywhere, she said, her voice steady but alive. Sarah's eyes gleamed. You're a legend, Laura. They're scrambling now. Laura smiled, the sound of her laugh light but grounded. I didn't do it for them. I did it for me. They clinked glasses. The moment a quiet vow. The boardroom had been a stage. But Laura wasn't performing. She was directing, letting the system play its part. As she walked home through Brooklyn, the city's pulse matched her own, a deliberate, unshakable rhythm. The truth was out, not in a blaze, but in a whisper that echoed. She opened her note app, adding, the storm is here. I'm not hiding anymore. The skyline glowed, a canvas of resilience. Laura wasn't just surviving. She was shaping the narrative, her power no longer hidden, her truth alive and undeniable. Demoted to a senior analyst under Marcus Reed, a junior strategist who'd claimed her work, and dismissed by Ethan Caldwell, the new CEO, Laura had waged a silent rebellion. She'd rewritten algorithms to inflate hollow metrics, stripped predictive variables, and silenced alerts, letting the system dazzle while hiding its flaws. The cracks had emerged. A $9 million San Francisco client had walked away, and a consultant from Los Angeles, David Kessler, had struggled to unravel her code, but Ethan and Marcus remained oblivious. Today, Laura's plan would crescendo. A hidden message, buried in the system's boardroom report, was about to go live, and Laura felt a pulse of anticipation, not fear, as the truth prepared to speak. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, checking the script she'd written weeks ago, a subtle piece of code tucked beneath layers of routine logs. It was designed to trigger during the board's quarterly review, injecting a single line into the executive dashboard. Numbers are polished, not real. Ask who built this. The message was understated, almost polite, but its impact would be seismic. Laura had crafted it after a Women in Tech meetup, inspired by a Seattle coder's words. The system always tells the truth, even when people don't. She'd tested it in a sandbox environment, ensuring it would appear seamlessly, untraceable to her login. Now, as the clock ticked toward the 8:30 a.m. board meeting, Laura saved her work and closed her laptop. The office was still, the wilting fern in Ethan's suite, a silent witness. She stood, her reflection faint in the glass, and felt a quiet power, not in vengeance, but in the certainty that her system would finally name its architect. The boardroom, a sleek space on the 23rd floor, buzzed with anticipation as Laura slipped in minutes before the meeting. She took a seat in the back, her presence barely noticed amid the suits and laptops. Marcus stood at the front, his navy blazer slightly askew, clicking through slides that glowed with her manipulated metrics, 98.7% forecast accuracy, record client engagement, green bars across the board. Ethan leaned back, his Chicago-honed smile radiating confidence, nodding as Marcus boasted of precision at scale. The board members, a mix of New York investors and remote attendees from Boston, scribbled notes, their faces impressed. Laura's heart beat steadily, her hands folded, her face a mask of neutrality. She'd seen these slides, her slides, repurposed with Marcus's name, but today they carried her hidden truth. The third slide loaded, a forecast model chart, and there it was, a soft gray line at the bottom, almost easy to miss. Numbers are polished, not real. Ask who built this. The room froze. A board member coughed, breaking the silence. Marcus blinked at the screen, his clicker faltering. Ethan's smile stiffened, his eyes narrowing as he leaned forward, squinting. "Is this part of the presentation?" asked Eleanor Hayes, a sharp-eyed investor from New York, her voice cutting through the tension. Laura stood outside the executive boardroom on the 23rd floor of Horizon Dynamics' Manhattan office, the New York skyline a steady anchor beyond the glass walls. It was 10:25 a.m., the air charged with a tension that had been building for weeks. Her silent rebellion rewriting the global data system's algorithms to inflate hollow metrics, stripping predictive variables, and silencing alert shad led to this moment. Priya Patel stood, her presence a quiet force. "I'll be brief," she said, her eyes steady. "We've worked with Laura for 5 years. Our success was built on her system's precision. When the quality dropped, we knew it wasn't her work. Now we see why." She turned to the board, her voice firm. "This morning, we approved a consulting agreement with Laura, transferring our entire system's budget to her leadership. She is the system, and we trust her more than whatever Horizon has become." The room froze. Ethan blinked, his composure cracking. Marcus opened his mouth, then closed it, his hands trembling. Laura's face remained still, her heart a quiet drum of vindication. Priya's words weren't just support, they were a reclamation, a public acknowledgement of the truth Laura had fought to protect. Martin Cross leaned back, his gaze shifting from Marcus to Ethan. "This raises serious questions about leadership and oversight," he said, his tone measured but cutting. "We'll need a full review." Ethan nodded, his voice strained. "We'll address this immediately." But the room's focus was on Laura, her presence no longer invisible. She closed her laptop, her voice steady. "I'll forward all documentation to compliance. The logs contain everything else." She stood, her movements deliberate, and walked out, leaving a silence louder than any speech. The boardroom's glass doors closed behind her, the skyline beyond a canvas of resilience. Laura didn't gloat, didn't linger. She'd spoken through data, through truth, and that was enough. Back at her desk, Laura opened her encrypted note app, her refuge since a Boston tech summit. "The 27th of March, she typed. "The truth spoke today. Priya saw me. The system held. I'm free." The words were a release, a shedding of the weight she'd carried since her demotion. She'd started a letter to my future self after a Chicago coaching session, and now she added to it, "You didn't need to shout. You built something real, and it carried you through." The office buzzed around her, but Laura felt apart from it, a quiet island of purpose. She'd joined a Women in Tech meetup the previous week, sharing her story as code weaver, and the group's support echoed in her mind. "You're rewriting the rules." She was, not with anger, but with precision, with integrity. That evening, Laura met Sarah at their West Village bar, the familiar warmth of their booth, a contrast to the office's chill. "You took them down," Sarah said, her grin wide. Priya's move was epic. Laura smiled, her laugh soft but alive. "I didn't take them down. I let the system show who they are." They clinked glasses, the moment a quiet celebration. Sarah's belief, Priya's trust, the meetup's encouragement, they were threads in a tapestry Laura had woven, one that held her steady. She'd also started a small initiative after a San Francisco workshop, mentoring young women in tech through a local nonprofit. It wasn't about glory, it was about passing on the strength she'd found, ensuring others could claim their own truths. As she walked home through Brooklyn, the city's pulse matched her own, a deliberate, unshakable rhythm. The reckoning wasn't about revenge. It was about restoration. She'd been erased, but now her name was known, her work undeniable. She opened her note app, adding, "The storm is over, I'm still standing." The skyline glowed, a beacon of possibility. Laura wasn't just surviving. She was thriving, not with noise, but with the quiet power of a truth that had reshaped the narrative. The boardroom had been her stage, but the victory was hers, earned through every line of code, every sleepless night, every choice to rise above. The future was hers to build, and Laura was ready, her heart light, her purpose clear. The system she'd built over 5 years, securing a $60 million deal with a Seattle client and streamlining workflows from San Francisco to Singapore, had been claimed by Marcus Reed, a junior strategist, while she was demoted to senior analyst by Ethan Caldwell, the new CEO. Her hidden message, "Numbers are polished, not real. Ask who built this," had disrupted a board meeting days ago, sparking questions and a summons from compliance. Now, Laura was called to the boardroom, not as a bystander, but as the architect whose truth could no longer be ignored. Her heart beat steady, not with fear, but with the quiet power of knowing the system was hers. And today, it would speak through her. The boardroom doors opened, and Laura stepped inside, her steps measured, her laptop tucked under her arm. The room was a fortress of polished wood and glass, filled with board members from New York and Boston, compliance officers, and, unexpectedly, Priya Patel, the VP of operations from the San Francisco client that had walked away from a $9 million renewal. Marcus sat at the far end, his navy blazer creased, his face pale and rigid. Ethan paced near the projector, his Chicago-honed smile replaced by a tight, forced expression. Laura took the empty seat at the table's end, her presence commanding a silence that felt heavier than words. No greetings, no small talk, just the weight of a reckoning. Martin Cross, the senior director, whose email had demanded, "Who is Laura Bennett?" leaned forward, his eyes sharp. "Miss Bennett, we need your insights on the system's discrepancies, particularly the predictive model's integrity." Laura nodded, her voice calm but resonant. "I'm ready to explain." She connected her laptop to the projector, her slides a stark contrast to Marcus's glossy dashboards. "The predictive engine is producing inaccurate outputs," she began, her tone clear, unyielding. "Its variables were reduced from 7 to 4 without adaptive compensation, causing a 10% drift that compounds each cycle." She displayed a chart overlaying her original model against Marcus's altered version. The gap's undeniable. The early warning system, designed to flag anomalies like delivery failures, was disabled in 3 tiers. This explains why the San Francisco client's shipments went undetected until they escalated. Heads turned toward Marcus, who stared at his hands, silent. Laura clicked to the commit history. A digital ledger of truth. Here are the changes, time-stamped and signed. They traced to Marcus Reed's credentials. The room stilled, the air thick with the weight of evidence. Laura's voice didn't waver, her words not an accusation, but a revelation, each fact a brick in the foundation of her legacy. Laura stood at her desk on the 22nd floor of Horizon Dynamics' Manhattan office, the New York skyline, a familiar tapestry beyond the glass walls. It was 8:15 a.m., the office still waking, its hum softer than the pulse of the city below. She folded her jacket carefully, unplugged her charger, and placed a small stack of personal items into a gray tote. That evening, Laura joined a Women in Tech meetup, her Codeweaver persona a beacon for her story. She shared her journey anonymously, describing a hypothetical exit from a company that tried to erase her. The group's responses were electric. "You're an inspiration. Your truth won." A coder from Seattle wrote, "New beginnings are where you shine." Laura saved the words in her encrypted note app, her refuge since a Boston summit. "The 29th of March, she typed. "I'm leaving, but I'm not gone. The system spoke, and I'm starting anew." She'd also started a mentoring initiative after a San Francisco workshop, guiding young women in tech through a local nonprofit. It wasn't about famille, it was about planting seeds, ensuring others could claim their own paths. Laura's final act at Horizon was a quiet one. She'd written a guide for the new hires she'd trained, a digital handbook on system basics, shared via a private link. "Your work is your signature," she wrote. "Sign it boldly." The recruits had messaged her, one from Dallas calling it a roadmap for success. The gesture grounded her, a reminder that her impact lingered, even as she moved on. She'd also begun a blog under Codeweaver, her first post titled "The Power of Quiet Wins." It wasn't about Horizon, it was about resilience, about trusting your craft to carry you through. The comments poured in, readers from Chicago to Miami sharing their own stories of rising above. Laura read them on her Brooklyn balcony, the skyline a canvas of hope. Over wine at their West Village bar, Laura shared her new role with Sarah. "San Francisco," she said, her voice alive with purpose. "A fresh start my way," Sarah's eyes gleamed. "You didn't just survive, Laura. You rewrote the story." They clinked glasses, the moment a quiet celebration. Sarah's belief, Priya's trust, the meetup's support, they were anchors in Laura's new chapter. She'd also planned a workshop in San Francisco, teaching professionals to protect their work in competitive fields. It was her way of giving back, of turning her pain into power for others. As she packed her apartment for the move, Laura found a notebook from a Chicago coaching session, her "Letter to My Future Self," tucked inside. "You faced erasure," she'd written, "but you built something stronger. Keep going." She added a new line. "You're free now, and the future is yours." The words were a vow, a promise to herself. The demotion hadn't broken her, it had freed her, pushing her toward a role where her system could breathe, untainted by politics. She opened her note app, typing, "The end was the beginning. I'm ready." The skyline glowed, a beacon of renewal. Walking through Brooklyn one last time before her flight, the city's pulse matched her own steady, vibrant rhythm. Laura wasn't just leaving Horizon. She was stepping into a life she'd earned, not through noise, but through the quiet power of her work. The San Francisco role was more than a job, it was a canvas, a chance to build without constraints. She thought of the recruits, the blog readers, the women she'd mentor, and felt a warmth, not of victory, but of purpose. The demotion had been a storm, but Laura had navigated it, her compass true. The skyline faded behind her, but the future shone ahead, bright and boundless, hers to shape. Her nameplate was gone, removed weeks ago after her demotion to senior analyst under Marcus Reed, a junior strategist who'd claimed her global data system, the system that had secured a $60 million deal with a Seattle client and streamlined workflows from San Francisco to Singapore. Ethan Caldwell, the new CEO, had dismissed her raise request, and her silent rebellion rewriting algorithms to expose their flaws, culminating in a boardroom message that forced a reckoning had led to this moment. Priya Patel, the San Francisco client's VP, had offered Laura a consulting role, affirming her as the system's true architect. Now, Laura was leaving, not with fanfare, but with a quiet strength, ready to embrace a new beginning. The office felt different today. Its glass corridors no longer a cage, but a passage to freedom. Laura's steps echoed softly as she moved toward the elevator, her tote light in her hand. The boardroom confrontation 2 days ago had been her vindication, her data-driven exposé of Marcus's failures, Priya's public support, the board's stunned silence. She hadn't shouted or gloated. She'd let the system speak, and it had named her. But Horizon was no longer her home. The $9 million San Francisco loss, the consultant David Kessler's struggle to unravel her code, the whispers of colleagues who saw but didn't speak all, were threads in a tapestry she was ready to leave behind. As the elevator doors opened, a voice broke through the morning's quiet. "You're not even saying goodbye?" Sarah, her closest ally, stood in the lobby, her smile awkward but warm, like someone seeing a friend through a fog. Laura paused, her heart softening. "I didn't think anyone would notice," she said, her voice light but honest. Sarah stepped closer, her eyes searching. "Everyone saw what happened, Laura. Maybe not out loud, but we saw it. You're a legend." The words were a gift, a bridge across the isolation Laura had felt since her demotion. She nodded, a faint smile breaking through. Thanks, Sarah. That means more than you know. As they walked toward the glass doors, another figure approached Henry, a junior developer who still ran reports the old way. He didn't speak, just gave a quick nod and slipped past, his quiet respect a final thread in her Horizon story. Laura pushed open the doors, the spring air crisp and alive, carrying the scent of possibility. Outside, the New York morning buzzed, taxis honking, pedestrians weaving through the streets. Laura pulled out her phone, opening an email she'd starred the night before. Offer confirmation. Principal Systems Architect. The San Francisco client, led by Priya, had offered her a role with double her Horizon salary, full technical autonomy, and a team that valued her vision. No Ethan, no Marcus, just clean code and honest work. She scrolled further, her eyes catching an older email, the one that had announced her demotion. Realignment of roles. She'd thought it was the end, a theft of her legacy. Now, she saw it for what it was, a redirection, a push toward a path she was meant to take. Her lips curved into a smile. Not of bitterness, but of clarity. She hadn't lost. She'd realigned, higher, on her own terms. Laura Bennett's journey through the glass corridors of Horizon Dynamics in Manhattan is a testament to the quiet power of resilience, the unshakable strength of expertise, and the enduring voice of truth. It began on a hopeful New York morning, when Laura, a systems architect who'd built a global data system that secured a $60 million deal with a Seattle client, stood ready to claim the raise she'd earned. Laura's story is a tapestry of resilience, woven from moments of betrayal, isolation, and quiet victories. It's the story of a woman who faced erasure, but reclaimed her narrative, not through noise, but through the precision of her craft. Her journey from a hopeful pitch in New York to a boardroom triumph and a San Francisco rebirth is a reminder that power lies not in titles, but in knowledge, integrity, and patience. She didn't just survive, she reshaped her destiny, leaving Horizon to grapple with its flaws while she built a brighter path. The skyline of New York, fading as she walked away, was no longer a cage, but a canvas, and Laura painted it with the colors of her truth. The lessons from Laura's story are profound and timeless, offering a blueprint for navigating today's challenges. First, trust your expertise, even when others dismiss it. Laura's deep knowledge of her system, honed through years of work, was her greatest asset. When faced with unfairness, document your contributions. Laura's encrypted notes and commit logs were her shield. In a world that often undervalues talent, your records are your voice. Second, choose strategic patience over reactive anger. Laura's silent rebellion was a masterclass in restraint, letting the system expose flaws rather than burning bridges. This approach preserved her dignity and amplified her impact. Third, build community, even in isolation. Laura's connections, Sarah's belief, Priya's trust, the women in tech meetup sustained her. Seek allies who see your worth and nurture those bonds. Finally, see setbacks as redirections. Laura's demotion felt like a loss, but it led her to a role where she could thrive. Embrace challenges as opportunities to realign with your purpose. For today's audience, these lessons are a call to action. In workplaces where politics or bias can overshadow merit, channel Laura's resilience. Keep a digital journal of your achievements, whether it's a project log or a performance tracker, to advocate for yourself in reviews or disputes. When faced with injustice, pause before reacting, strategize like Laura, using data or evidence to make your case, whether it's an email to HR or a presentation to stakeholders. Build your network, online or in person, through LinkedIn groups, industry meetups, or mentorship programs, finding allies who uplift you. If you face a setback, a missed promotion, a toxic job, reflect on what it's teaching you. Laura pivoted to San Francisco, but you might pivot to a new role, a side project, or a bold career shift. Start small. Update your resume, take a course, or share your expertise through a blog or podcast, like Laura's Codeweaver posts. Laura's story reminds us that the truth, when rooted in integrity, always finds a way. In a world of noise, her quiet power through code, patience, and purpose offers a model for us all. Whether you're in a New York office, a Seattle startup, or a Chicago classroom, you have a system to build, a truth to tell. Trust it, protect it, and let it lead you to your own new beginning, where the skyline of your future shines bright, boundless, and yours to shape. Her 5-year labor had transformed workflows from San Francisco to Singapore, boosting revenue by 18% and cementing her as the backbone of the company's success. But Ethan Caldwell, the new CEO from Chicago, dismissed her request with a vague promise of better timing. And soon, her systems architecture bore the name of Marcus Reed, a junior strategist whose inexperience was evident in his Dallas server crash. The betrayal deepened when Ethan demoted Laura to a senior analyst role under Marcus, stripping her leadership and erasing her legacy in a company-wide email that celebrated Marcus's vision. Laura's world, once vibrant with purpose, became a shadowed place where colleagues avoided her gaze, and even Sarah, her closest ally, urged her to move on. Yet, Laura didn't break. In the quiet of early mornings, she uncovered a hidden truth. The system ran on Apex Core, a framework she'd licensed in Boston with her own funds, and contained undocumented micromodules only she understood. This discovery, sparked during a Chicago Tech Summit, was her anchor. Instead of shouting, Laura waged a silent rebellion, rewriting algorithms to inflate hollow metrics, stripping predictive variables, and silencing alerts. Her changes let Marcus and Ethan's flawed leadership shine until it didn't. A $9 million San Francisco client walked away, citing delivery failures, and Priya Patel, their VP, messaged Laura, sensing her absence in the system's decline. A consultant from Los Angeles, David Kessler, struggled to unravel her code, exposing Marcus's inadequacy. Laura's isolation grew, but her resolve deepened, fueled by a Women in Tech meetup, a podcast as code weaver, and mentoring initiatives that connected her to a broader purpose. The reckoning came when Laura's hidden message, "Numbers are polished, not real. Ask who built this," appeared in a boardroom report, stunning Ethan, Marcus, and the board. Summoned to explain, Laura presented irrefutable data, tracing the system's flaws to Marcus's changes, while Priya's declaration of a consulting contract with Laura affirmed her as the system's heart. The boardroom fell silent, not with defeat, but with the weight of truth. Laura left Horizon, not in anger, but in quiet triumph, accepting a principal systems architect role in San Francisco with double her salary and full autonomy. As she packed her Brooklyn apartment, she reflected on the demotion email that once felt like an end. It was a redirection, a push toward a future where her system could thrive, untainted by politics. With Sarah's parting words, the recruit's respect, and her blog's growing reach, Laura stepped into a new beginning, her heart light, her legacy intact.